Rob, like, I don't have a lot of money. No one's going to try to come and take the little bit of money that I do have, right?
Anything that you might spend money on legitimately could be leveraged to commit fraud.
Obviously, we've talked about some of those antiquated things, right, with fraud.
Yep.
Talk to me about AI.
Yeah.
Is this a whole new thing of, oh, good grief, they can look like me, they can sound like me now, my signature, what is that even worth? Right?
Yeah.
All the things.
All the things. Yeah, AI is such an interesting technology. And like most technologies, there's so many beneficial ways that it can be used.
Yeah.
And it can also be exploited to for nefarious purposes. So right now, kind of where at this point in time, which that can change in the future, but at this point in time, really I see AI being leveraged to make existing scams more believable. So let's talk about the grandma scam that we just talked about. So the way that worked pre-AI is that you'd be called up and in the social engineering aspect of it would be, hey, grandma, it's your favorite grandson, that type of thing. And then when you say, oh, is this, Johnny, how you doing? So now you've told them what your grandson's name is Johnny, right? So that's kind of how it works pre-AI. Now with AI, depending on how many, voice clips are out there and how those voice prints are being harvested, theoretically AI could be used to now instead of socially engineering Johnny's name, now what we can do is AI could now make that voice sound like Johnny.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
Yeah.
So but it's the same scam. Right? It just makes it more believable. In the news recently, there was a situation where a CEO's voice was impersonated, and the fraudsters were able to move, I think it was $25 million or something crazy like that. So it makes it more believable. But the thing is that same type of CEO scam, just like the grandma scam, it happened before. It was just happening a little bit differently. And they're going back to their leveraging emotion. So whereas now they're getting a phone call that sounds like the CEO and saying, hey, I need you to send $25 million. Before they were getting an email saying, hey, this is the CEO and I'm in a meeting and I can't call you and I need you to do this transaction immediately. So in both of those cases, a relatively simple control thwarts both.
Yeah.
Because in both situations, if you reach out to the CEO at a known, contact channel, maybe that's a cell phone, maybe that's an internal Teams message or direct message, and validate that out of band, it thwarts both of those scams. And as a business owner or as a CEO, if you already set that tone and inform your team, I am never going to contact you via email, via phone, and request you to do any type of monetary transaction.
Especially a $25 million one.
Right,
but
right.
Yes, yeah.
And if I do, this is what I expect you to do. I expect you to use this code word that we've established. Or I expect you to contact my assistant and validate that I am in such and such a place, or that, whatever that procedure is. If you get ahead of that, it doesn't matter if they're using AI to mimic their voice. It doesn't matter if they're using AI to mimic their to make a video.
Right.
You've got that procedure in place. So that's where, as I sit right now, that's my feeling on AI, because it really can, if you're being prudent and you're taking those precautions and you're putting those controls into place ahead of time, then it doesn't matter if they're doing it through AI or doing it through a more conventional social engineering, it's going to get thwarted.
Yeah. And even, I love that you said code word, right? Because even as consumers, right, we
Yes.
don't have to be CEOs to have code words on our accounts.
Yeah. And even talking about like family safety and having a code word for your family for non-financial transactions. It's that little piece of information that you can hand back and forth to say, yeah, I know that this is the right person.
Okay. Love that. So one thing that has increased, I feel like, calls.
Mm-hmm.
Scam calls,
Yep.
left and right.
Yep.
Right? We're getting constant calls from numbers that we don't recognize.
Right.
What are your thoughts on this? Caller ID, just ignoring calls we don't know enough? Like, what are your thoughts?
I wouldn't say it's enough, but it's a great start.
Okay.
I mean, you're going to get 90% of the way by just not answering the phone for people that you don't recognize, or phone numbers that you don't recognize. If they really, really need to talk to you, they'll leave a message and you can call them back.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the thing that you need to realize with caller ID is that it's not infallible. It can be spoofed, is the technical term, although it doesn't sound very technical. A caller ID can be spoofed so that it can look like it's coming from a number different than the number that's actually calling you. And there's a lot of legitimate reasons to do this. You know, you might have a business and you might have 1-800 number for your entire business, but then you've got all these different direct lines. When you're making outbound calls, you want them all to look like they're coming from an 800 number. Right?
Sure.
So
yeah.
that's a legitimate use case for that. But as we talked about, any technology can be exploited for nefarious purposes, and this is one of them. And so they can make a phone number appear like it's coming from someone that you know. It can make it appear that it's coming from your financial institution. They can make it appear that it's coming from some type of governmental agency. So you can't trust caller ID, but not answering calls that you don't recognize is a really, really good start.
Yeah. Or even if you are recognizing it, right? And it's like, oh, it's my financial institution, or
Right.
it's the government.
Right.
They'll leave a message.
If they really need to talk to you, they'll leave a message. Now,
Okay.
one of the things that I should say, I have a whole team of people that call our members to verify unusual transactions.
Yeah.
They will leave a message.
Yeah.
If you get a call from somebody claiming to be the Social Security Administration or the IRS or your utility company,
Yeah.
that's where you need to be really, really careful.
Okay.
And so in those circumstances, and this is where we go back to the emotion, right?
Yes.
Panic. The Social
1
Security
million%.
Administration is calling
Yeah.
me. The IRS is calling me. The FBI is calling me, whatever. The thing that you need to realize is that those entities are not going to call you and start asking for personal identifying information or sensitive or confidential information. Your financial institution, I don't care what financial institution it is, they're not going to call you and say, well, I need to verify you with your Social Security number, or I need to verify you with your code word, or I'm going to send you a 6-digit code so that you can verify yourself. That's not going to happen. If your financial institution's calling you, they should be giving you information, not asking for information. So that's the key thing to remember when you're talking to, people who are claiming to be from anywhere, is that they should not be asking you for information. The common one that we're seeing now is, it's right now it's with one of these big online retailers, but it can really happen with anyone.
Right. Is
that because they're being impersonated by bad actors, is they'll call up and they say, oh, there's this charge on your account that we don't recognize, or that seems suspicious. And then they say, well, did you do this transaction? They say, no, I didn't do that transaction. I was like, okay, well, this transaction is actually linked to, a larger fraud that's being investigated by the FTC, and I'm going to transfer you to the FTC. And so, okay, so, all right. No,
Yeah,
that's not going to happen.
Happening. Okay.
And then the FTC gets on the line, and then they start saying, oh, well, it's not just that you're victimized, but we actually believe that you're involved in this fraud. And that, and now we're transitioning even into more panic, right?
Yeah, more scare tactics.
Right.
Okay.
And then they start saying, well, in order to protect yourself, you need to withdraw this money from your account, and you need to deposit it into a crypto ATM, or you need to mail it. Or even the craziest one is someone's going to drive by your house, and you're going to put this package in the car of cash.
What?
So, and we sit in this safe environment and we think, I would never do that.
Right.
But
Exactly.
very
Yeah.
savvy and intelligent people are being convinced to do these type of things, and it just speaks to the power of that fear and that panic of, oh my gosh, I need to do this, or this, I'm going to be arrested, or or even worse. And, fraudsters are now even transitioning into, threats, and we're going to harm your family, and, these types of things. And it's just awful, awful, terrible things. And so we need people to be aware of these things. And if you don't answer the phone, you've reduced your chances of getting involved in something like this.
Okay.
Dramatically.
Love that. And so we're not writing checks. We're
Yep.
not answering the phone.
Yes.
Right.
Well,
We're just going to be hermits
looking-
and not
yeah.
do anything,
Yeah,
and we'll
we're
be
looking
safe. No.
We're looking at our account. We're not sharing things on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. So So but we need to live our lives, and so
Absolutely.
it's just doing things. Each person needs to evaluate their own risk, but it sounds cliche, but knowledge is power, and knowing is where it starts. So if you're aware of these types of things and you're aware of the risks, it's one thing to take a risk knowing what the risk is. It's another thing to do something without knowing the risks that are involved.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So obviously another thing that these wonderful scammers use are current events.
Yes.
Right? Things that are happening, not just the fact that it's tax season,
Right.
but other things that might be happening in our world,
Yes.
in our lives, and utilizing those. Do you want to give us some examples or tell us more about what that might look like?
Yeah. So really anything, to paint it with broad strokes, anything that you might spend money on legitimately could be leveraged to commit fraud.
Okay.
So you brought up tax season.
Yeah.
So this is where, kind of dovetailing tax season with the imposter fraud, is that you get a call from the IRS and they say that you owe taxes. Okay. So that's a concern. That's how they're leveraging a current event. Like when we have a major sporting event, they can leverage that. When there's a major disaster. So there was just the tragic, bridge collapse, and I
Yes.
think it was Baltimore,
Yeah.
right? So now if you get a phone call from someone saying, hey, we're with, XYZ charity, and we're trying to raise money for the victims of this tragic incident. And, as good people, we want to help others. And so we're like, yes, I want to contribute, $50 or $100 or whatever it is. Well, you give them your credit card information over the phone, and then you see charges for $500 and $5,000 coming from your account. So unfortunately, we're in the world where you just need to trust but verify, right? So if you get a phone call from somebody that tells you about some tragic event, and it's an event that that's happened, and go to a known source where you can, make your contribution. Go to, well-known charitable organizations and go directly to them. Because if you get a phone call from somebody claiming to be from a charitable organization, that doesn't mean that they are from that organization.
Right.
Things like the Olympics and, any major event, the eclipse, anything can be leveraged. So be aware of that. And when you take that event and you combine it with some type of an emotion where it might be, hey, this is the eclipse sweepstakes and you've won, $20 million in the eclipse sweepstakes, or whatever it may be. That's the thing that you need to, that's where your kind of ears perk up, the bells and whistles should go off, and it should be like, okay, I need to tread a little bit lightly here.
Okay.
Be careful.
All of us, obviously, at least me, I'm not going to be a victim of this. This is never going to happen to me.
Right.
I'm smarter. I've sat with Rob enough that I'm immune to fraud.
Right.
Is that true?
I would like to say that I'm immune to fraud, but the thing is that it's really, we don't want to live our lives paranoid. We don't want to be skeptical of every single thing.
Yeah.
So education is key, prudence, and really realizing what, how are they going to hook me? They're going to hook me with that emotion.
Yeah.
And so that's where when I feel that emotion, whether it's a positive emotion or a negative emotion, that's where I need to kind of check myself and say, all right, trust but verify. Where can I go to verify this? So and being vigilant, because carelessly clicking on a link, carelessly responding to a text message or a phone call, and that's where kind of the snowball starts rolling down the hill. And the other thing I would say, Kristalina, is that for many viewers, regular viewers of the podcast, I'm not saying a lot of new things, right? These are a lot of things we've shared before.
Right.
But share these with your friends. Share them with your family. Sit down with your kids, especially your teenagers. Maybe your kids that are just getting a phone. Maybe your teenager that just got a job, and so now they have an account. This is the time to talk to them about these types of things, and so that they're establishing good financial habits right from the beginning. And
again, not to instill fear in them, but
right.
Education.
Yep, absolutely, 100%.
Okay, love that. So, what would you say? I mean, we've talked about a whole bunch of different scams. Mm-hmm. What's the most common?
Right now, the one that I'm seeing the most of is the imposter scam.
Okay.
That we've talked about. Now, that's a pretty broad umbrella, right?
Yeah,
because many different organizations or people can be impersonated. So the key there is no one should call you and ask you to provide them with information. It doesn't matter what the reason is. If they're asking for socials or passwords or code words or pins or the 3-digit code on the back of your card, there's just no reason to call you and ask for that information. If they're a legitimate organization, then they will have no problem with you saying, you know what, I'm going to call you back at the number that's published on your website.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
awesome. So watch out for imposter scams. Yep. But then also, Rob, I don't have a lot of money. No one's going to try to come and, take the little bit of money that I do have, right?
Well, and that's a great point, Kristalina, because there are people that think, oh, well, because I don't have money, because I am living paycheck to paycheck, that means that I don't need to worry about this stuff because I don't have any money to take, right? But that's not necessarily the case, because what that transitions into, if you're not careful, is that we fall victim to a different type of a scam where it's not, send me money to invest in crypto or to invest in, XYZ commodity, but hey, I've got this work from home job for you and I'm going to send you a check or I'm going to email you a check. And what you need to do is you need to take that money from that check and you need to go buy gift cards or you need to go invest in crypto. And so they feed you money, but it's not legitimate money. And that goes back to what we were talking about with checks. They're a glorified IOU.
Yeah.
So they send you this check that you think is legitimate, and then you take this money, whether you take this money to go and do what they said to do, or you take this money and you use it to pay your bills, that check's not good. It's going to return. And if you've used that money, it's going to overdraw your account. And now you're going to owe your financial institution that money. So just because you don't have money doesn't mean that you don't need to pay attention and be careful about what's going on in your world and the potential to be exploited in a scam. Okay,
love that. And just maybe to hit this home a little bit more, who's at risk?
Everybody's at risk.
Okay.
We think that it's the young people because they're on social media or because they're naive, and that's true. And we think it's elderly people because they're lonely or they're more easily exploited, and that is also true. But just because you're not in one of those two groups doesn't mean you can't be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I just have a few stats I want to share with you here. I have that fraud cost consumers more than $2.7 billion.
Yeah.
In 2023.
Yes.
Is that really?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what goes back to my prior comment about living in an honest world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's fair. And then the FTC received more than 2.6 million reports of fraud.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so appreciative that I get invited onto this podcast so that we can talk about this with people, because it's not a small problem.
Yeah. So it's happening
Yeah.
daily, if not by the minute. So us as consumers, we need to be
Yeah.
aware.
Yeah, because if we work together, your financial institution can only do so much to protect you. The government can only do so much to protect you. Let's everyone get involved, and let's everyone have our eyes open, and if we're all working together, then the chances of bringing those numbers down, those shocking numbers down, goes up.
Well, Rob, any other parting thoughts or things that we need to hit home with? We know we're not going to write checks. We're going to not answer numbers that are unknown, right? We're going to make sure that we're checking our account often, and that we're utilizing forms of payment that make sense for when we're making purchases. Anything else we need to hit home with our audience?
I would just say that, use the resources that are available to you. So if you come into a situation where you're just not quite sure, come and talk to us so that we can help guide you forward.
Love it. Love it.
Did you see what I did
yeah,
there with the
that
thing?
Was perfect. I loved it. I loved it. Rob, you tied it right in. And honestly, though, that's the purpose of you and your whole team and all of us at Mountain America, right? Here to help if you've got questions. Love it.
100%.
Love it. Well, thank you, Rob, for your time today. We've enjoyed having you as always.
Thank you, Kristalina. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And thanks to all of you as well. And we will see you on the next episode of Guiding You Forward.